Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. This episode is brought to you by Overwolf. With over 1,500 games supported, 165,000 creators, and 38 million monthly active users, Overwolf is the guild for in-game creators. Whether you're a gamer, creator, or game studio, Overwolf is the ultimate destination for integrating UGC in games. For game studios, Overwolf offers CurseForge for studios, a white label solution that lets game makers and publishers easily integrate mods safely and seamlessly into their games, both existing and new, at zero cost. It's battle-tested by AAA studios and games, including Maxis with The Sims 4, Studio Wildcard with Ark, Take-Two Interactive, and others. For creators, Overwolf is the all-in-one platform that enables creators to build, distribute, and monetize in-game apps, mods, and game servers. In 2022, Overwolf paid over $160 million to in-game creators, proving that they truly value the talents and contributions of the gaming community. You can check out everything Overwolf has to offer at overwolf.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Nico Vori. Today's episode marks a return to one of our most exciting and favorite topics from last year, the state of Web3 gaming. Our podcast episodes, written articles, and game deconstructs in the Web3 space have been some of the most consumed content we've released and produced, and we are always excited to come back for more. So almost exactly a year ago, mid-November 2023, we explored Game7's groundbreaking report, which gave us the first objective look, 30,000-foot view look, at Web3 gaming's first 6 years. Now, Game7 has released their second installment a year later, expanding their analysis with fresh data on platform trends, player engagement models, and the overall health of the Web3 gaming ecosystem. So joining us today, again, a year ago, George Issikos, a core contributor to Game7 and one of the authors behind this year's 2024 report. So we'll be exploring the emerging shifts in blockchain game development, the latest on funding and platform dynamics, and how these insights could shape the future of gaming. So without further ado, George, welcome back to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Nico. Excited to be back.
Awesome. Well, as we were just joking, a year in Web3 is like 100 years in almost any industry. So why don't we start with just a quick background on you, and then we're going to dive into the report and all the data. So who are you and what is Game7?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm a core contributor for Game7. I've been with the team for the past 2.5, almost 3 years. And yeah, I'm a core contributor, mainly spending my time within research that we use to either drive decisions internally for projects across our ecosystem or produce some of these external-facing reports. This year, with the great support of Naavik, by the way, we missed this part in the beginning.
That's right. Yeah, Naavik is a partner on this report. Sorry, I was very remiss of me to mention that, but I'm glad you brought it up. Of course. Yeah, it was actually super fun working with the team. About myself, I have been lucky to start playing within the blockchain gaming ecosystem from 2018. Of course, different world back then, tremendously different brands, different trends, different beliefs, different ambitions, but regardless, an exciting journey. Game7, talking about Game7, is a fantastic ecosystem. I'm proud to call home. We used to say we try to build an ecosystem where both developers and gamers can both win. But I think is a unique place across the Web3 gaming space that covers a number of initiatives across research, across building products and incubating initiatives, investing, and building some groundbreaking technology over the next year. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I think we covered everything. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's a good intro there. So nice little overview. Okay, and let's do the same thing, same kind of overview for the Web3 gaming ecosystem. Again, a year is a really long time in Web3, and crypto moves at lightning speed. I mean, just today we're recording on November 15th, which of course is post Donald Trump's election. And of course, Bitcoin has like soared to 90,000, which is insane in just a matter of days. So this space moves very quickly. It goes up and it goes down. Tell me and tell our listeners a bit about what the last year has looked like compared to last year. What has happened at the high level, 30,000 foot level? How would you summarize the state of the ecosystem?
Of course. And by the way, we try to optimize the report as a very light read that you don't necessarily have to read necessarily across every category, and just give you the high level look. And then if you have questions, we're here to provide more data. So high level picture, of course, many non-gaming things impacted significantly the space, the US election, uncertainty about the US regulation environment for sure make many game developers not sure about launching a token, launching a project, what to do, where should they move my company to, all these things, while not necessarily, strictly speaking, gaming related, definitely impacted the ecosystem. I would say some very interesting growth, not amazing, but definitely promising growth across all the key indicators, across the net contribution of new games, the investments, token launches. We had some great growth there. We had some new key themes, play to airdrop, try to be a play to earn V2. Definitely learn us a few things, but we also have a few things to work on. We had significant launches of projects off the grid. You have Ubisoft doing 2 more experiments. You have MapleStory announcing a blockchain network. You have Nexon, Konami, Bandai Namco all doing small experiments, and a few other great Web3 projects. We continue to also focus a bit too much on maybe gaming infrastructure instead of gaming content. I think we're at the point where we're really looking out for experiences. Yeah. But yeah, we will have the chance
quick note on that. I always thought this. I was like, there's more picks and shovels than there are like gold mines to mine. This was true last year too, actually. So it's really interesting to say that it's continuing. That trend is continuing.
Yes, it's getting worse. I mean, look, we can see this in a number of ways. Of course, having a robust experimentation about the infrastructure for games is super important, of course. But at the same time, I think also the market is looking definitely for more actual experiences that you can play and have fun with. And also developers are looking for this to learn more, get data. There's no way to experiment about economic models with presentations and white papers. You need running gaming, running economies, right?
Okay, well, thanks for that, George. That was a very nice overview. I think one of the big trends that I've seen is you never know what's going to happen. That's always the trend. And I think one of the most interesting things that I've seen certainly in recent months, and it hasn't even really existed for a full year, is Telegram and Telegram's role in Web3 gaming. We actually did an episode not too long ago with Simon Davis of Mighty Bear Games. He's building out there in the wild, wild, wild west of Telegram meets Web3. So tell me a little bit about what has happened there. Why has this particular platform gained traction among developers? And what are we going to see here as it tries to support gaming? Telegram famously has very few employees. And so how are they able to support an ecosystem and tooling for all these developers?
Yeah, I think Telegram definitely was one of the key developments of last year. I think it's worth starting with a minor definition. Like Telegram, when talking about Telegram, we're talking about two things. Number one is the application, the very well-known messaging platform that can act as a distribution, in a sense, for your game or any other application. And then there are the underlying networks that the Telegram as a company, what you might have seen the term TON, operate, which were like one announced and one running a network. These two things are the main proposition of Telegram to the Web3 gaming space. They're not necessarily the same, because sometimes we might see, someone using Telegram but with another chain and vice versa. But yeah, Telegram definitely happened for Web3 gaming last year. Many ways to explain this, right? Let me try in a very rough way to try to think of the main drivers. Number one, it's a year where we still don't have either a friendly or a tier framework for mobile game developers to practically monetize their games through mainstream distribution platforms. Yes, there has been some progress, but we're far from the ideal space where games can really compete with their Web2 equivalents. Web3 games can compete, right? So developers want to find alternatives. They have good content. They know timing is important. They want to go live for a number of reasons, and Telegram provided too many of those alternative paths to do this. We also had some major successes by Telegram Ton-related projects. We all see the numbers. Some of them might be, even too ambitious, but we definitely seen some fantastic numbers. Even if you don't necessarily believe the active user metric, which we can argue about, that is not ideal for 1,000 reasons. We also saw, big exchanges saying this game brought us X million of KYC users. So at this point, it becomes relevant. Even if someone is a non-believer says, okay, we got something there. Again, you have a very unfriendly distribution landscape for mobile game developers for Web3 games. You have some of those fantastic numbers that developers say, okay, I want this for my game too. You also have some exchanges that they prioritize, potentially listings, or they were definitely more friendly in a very calm year for gaming tokens for exchange listings. They were more positive. And again, game developers said, maybe this is an interesting path for me to grow. And also you have the value prop of the core application, right? While there are many things to talk about from an infra perspective, the great experience of opening up your messaging apps, and as we talk on Telegram, I can start a game, I can buy tokens, I can do some kind of commercial transactions in a seamless way. The value prop is big, right? So I think these were the key drivers for interest to the Telegram value prop for Web3 game developers last year.
Yeah, we're going to get into geographic differences here, but when, again, Simon Davis from Mighty Bear Games just a few weeks ago actually was on the podcast, he was saying that he was genuinely surprised by the skew of the distribution of his player base as it relates to his products. He speculated that would be similar across the board, which he had a huge audience from Nigeria, for example, and Africa in general, South America, Latin America, and kind of, for lack of a better phrase, not as affluent parts of Asia. So very interesting skew there. He knew he had theories around it, because play to earn, play to airdrop. We're going to get to that in a second as well. But what are your thoughts on this geographic distribution? Has that changed over this last year? Has Telegram moved the needle in that sense? Or are we still seeing the same kind of breakdown where it's mostly still North America, United States, then you've got Korea, Asia, and then it's kind of rest of world?
Yeah, first of all, what Simon mentioned, yes, it's consistent with the feedback we're hearing from other game developers. I don't think this is a surprise, right? You do expect emerging markets to drive initially, alternatives to the mainstream solution across any kind of tech theme. So that's not a surprise. I do think there is a massive potential to onboard bigger part of the world. And for me, it's also a big opportunity to apply pressure to potentially the big players to try to reconsider or maybe accelerate their approach. So I would say this, at this point, no one should argue that Telegram will give you your target player base in 10 minutes. But with a lack of a better audience or a better path to market for mobile game developers, this remains very interesting, even if it's not your target audience from day one.
Yeah. But what do you think it means for Web3 gaming innovation? We had this big phase last year, the year before, where we saw, last year we haven't seen a lot of funding going in, but originally we saw a lot of funding going in. And when there was this big rush of developers coming into Web3, it was all about, AAA. You can't do AAA on Telegram. You can't do AAA targeting, Africa, Latin America. What do you think that means for both the existing players who have raised ungodly sums of money and still presumably have some kind of war chest to sit on, and then new developers coming in who are like, oh, wow, there's this exciting new space called Telegram combined with Web3. We can do some really cool stuff, but we can't do Web3. We can't do AAA.
Yes. And this ties to so many other points of the report, your point there. But I would say this, based on the experience we have so far with the games that are actively experimenting on Telegram, it feels like it's not a binary choice. Oh, I'm going to move my stuff from Android or iOS to Telegram or vice versa. It's more about, I'm building a mobile game, I'm building a PC game, I'm building whatever. Let me build a companion app. Let me build something that I can, try to capture this growing user base. So we definitely see a trend of Telegram being used as, a platform to complement existing efforts rather than replace the existing ones. And until we see, I know there are a couple of, allow me to say, more advanced games being developed on Telegram right now. Until we can see the the gameplay experience and how this plays in the market, I don't think we're going to see many teams saying I'm fully pivoting on Telegram, but mainly I'm going to use Telegram to explore this, to be a first mover. And why not bring my gamers back, bring this user base back to my PC game, my console game, my whatever it is game.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Simon was saying as well. It was really interesting. This is a classic one of those where you've got it's the perfect place for smaller developers to do some experimentation. Yeah. The big guys are going to be nervous about touching it. Telegram obviously has its content moderation problem. Pavel Durov getting arrested and having quite a colorful personality, I'm sure it doesn't help with the kind of the reputation risk for the larger companies. So this is a perfect world for smaller developers who are who also can afford, even if mobile was more friendly, even if Android or Google Play and iOS were more friendly, you'd still be competing against all the other developers. You're still competing against Supercell, and you can't afford the CPIs, regardless of how much your Web3 audience actually raises your LTV. So it's a very interesting space, I think, where it combines distribution for free, essentially, scrappy and lenient platform rules, at least as of right now on Telegram, and an ability to monetize in a way that is unique to this ecosystem, the Web3 monetization piece. So it feels like a really interesting kind of perfect storm. This is certainly one that I'm going to be watching. Let's put it that way. I'm going to be watching Telegram and how this evolves. Who knows what's going to happen? But I find it's a really fascinating space that seems to be moving very quickly. TBD how it plays out. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts there. Like, Zynga, as longtime listeners will know, I will always bring up Zynga at least once in an episode. But Zynga was, of course, built on the back of free distribution on Facebook, Canvas, right? And so my big question, and of course, then they shut it down, and you live by the platform, you die by the platform. It's a saying of mine across the years. So this, I think, feels to me a similar one where it's like, well, Telegram for now is allowing this to play out essentially as like an experiment that has big scale, 1 billion users. But where does it go when Telegram either wants to monetize this audience, which they may not because Pavel Durov doesn't need the money and runs Telegram as his personal pet project, or they introduce some kind of content moderation or rules or guidelines or whatever, where it becomes much more difficult to compete. Anyway, long question, but Telegram, I think, deserves a more conversation than it's getting in the mainstream gaming press. And that's why I'm so glad that because you're looking at it, I'm going to use every opportunity to dig into this even further with you.
There are obviously super relevant question for so many builders in the space. There are a couple of ideas and beliefs there. Number one is you draw the parallel between Zynga, Facebook, and Telegram, and most most experienced mobile game developers saying there is no way that Telegram will really optimize for gaming because it doesn't make sense from a business perspective, right? The same way Facebook would never become, a ridiculously gaming optimized platform. They did this, they shut it down because it's not a gaming platform, right? So one of the big question marks for Telegram is whether Telegram can remain Telegram, a popular messaging app, while also becoming a very specialized gaming platform. And then, of course, you have the dual nature of Telegram as an app, Tron as a network, or any other chain in their position, and then all the other surrounding infrastructure. While Telegram has a very open and very friendly bot approach overall, it's very easy, very convenient to use bots for so many use cases. What we've heard so far and through our own experiments is that it's not very easy, for example, to capture information or learn more about your user base. I think those challenges will be familiar with a pain point of a game developer 15 years back with Facebook. So, this is a challenge. And I would say the success of early projects on Telegram will, in my opinion, dictate the base of that Telegram will move moving forward. As you said, Telegram does not need, strictly speaking, Web3 gaming to become relevant, but it's definitely an area that you can really differentiate, especially as long as the big mobile players are saying, we will see about Web3 games.
Yeah.
So, we will see.
Okay, we will see. Famous sitting on the fence words there, but that's fine. I happen to agree with you. I think we will see. This is one of those where you can't predict what's going to happen because it's a secondary use case that happens to have blown up. I don't know if they planned for it to blow up like this, but it has. And now it's a question of, okay, let's see what they do about it. Do they lean into it or do they step out of it? That's really the big question. Okay, well, let's move away from mobile and Telegram. Let's move on to other platforms. Epic Games Store. I think according to your report, they added 81 new Web3 titles over the last year or so. why do you think they're leaning in so much when Steam, for example, is leaning out? It's a curious dichotomy that hasn't really, I haven't had it well explained to me up until this point.
Yeah. So the big picture is that obviously Epic is, if I want to be 100% accurate with you, I would say I'm not sure whether Epic is pro Web3, but it's definitely not against it. Mm-hmm. So, we've seen both from Tim Sweeney a couple of swings between being metaverse friendly, then saying no, then yes, we're happy to play with Web3, or at some point we will see, not anytime soon, you won't see skins on Fortnite, but we will see in the future. So, and I think big part of the number you've seen on these charts, while of course we want, as a Web3 space, we want to outline the good developments, and this remains a good development because Epic is definitely a key path for into the market for many Web3 games. It's also a number influenced by the self-publication change of Epic's approach that happened like close to 1.5 years back, right? So it became easier to self-publish games, and this, of course, partially influenced a number of Web3 games trying to do this. Now, again, question marks, we haven't seen the will of Epic to optimize their stack, their APIs, and all the surrounding tooling to Web3, even if it's not allowing as aggressively other tools. We haven't seen how open they are to the idea of customizing their infrastructure for Web3 games to allow for easier acquisition of assets directly, of crypto assets, or trading, or like adding native capability for Web3 use cases inside their platform. But again, in the absence of a friendlier Steam stance, I think Epic is a must for PC games. We also seen with Off the Grid. Yes, Off the Grid was popular because of console, but having also Epic and being seen as trending games for 1-2 weeks, I think this was an important moment for them to really, try to get interest from average gamers saying, okay, cool, Battle Royale game, let me play. Extraction, whatever. So yeah, Epic is, while we cannot be sure that Epic loves Web3, I think I'm glad that Epic exists and it's an option for Web3 games this time around.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for me is you need to have places to experiment, right? Web3 is still somewhat unproven in terms of, actually being a mainstream thing. And, you can play around on mobile, and now it's great that there's Telegram, right? So you've got an option, an option to experiment. Epic, there's an option there for PC games.
Yes.
It's nice that there are options, and that the more of these options there are, the more developers can experiment with business models and gameplay styles and genres and what have you, form factors, in a way that was somewhat limiting in the early days of Web3, certainly, because it was like, web only, essentially, right? Like desktop web only, open web. And while that has its affordances, it's completely, you can do whatever you want. It also has its drawbacks. So is that a trend you're thinking is going to continue into the next year now, where we're going to have a bit more acceptance, even if it's not mainstream acceptance, even if it's not like the, Apple and Google level of acceptance, and they move very slowly. Do you see more of these popping up? And if so, where would these opportunities come from?
Yes, I think it would be a way better year from a distribution perspective. There are many developments, in a sense, bigger than gaming that could drive changes in this area, including, of course, again, potentially the new regulatory environment in the US, a new approach overall against crypto. We start seeing discussions about the Bitcoin as a strategic asset for reserves. I'm not saying this is relevant to the average game developer, strictly speaking, but if Bitcoin necessarily has a new role in this world, I do expect other crypto assets to definitely find its space across the mainstream tech stack for Web3, for games, even Web3. We're also seeing, today we're seeing active experimentation of many teams in the space. So some people say, Microsoft has been investing in Web3. Of course, Microsoft invested in so many topics, so I don't think it's many areas. It's not super important that one of their fans like deploying capital in Web3, but you have Sony, for example. Sony playing around with the concept. Again, one small part of Sony, most likely, but still playing with the concept of having my own layer 2. That means they understand what Ethereum is, they understand the need for scalability, they understand what the EVM means, they understand what Ziki technology or whatever means. So I think overall this can make us optimistic that at least those big platforms will stop kick games, right? So it's one thing to say, I will not support your Web3 plans. That's borderline acceptable, but I think it's very bad if they don't even allow games to access the user base. We saw this with Off the Grid, right? Off the Grid does not have any Web3 features on console, and it's still, relatively speaking, a restrictive experience, yet console was important. I think many users learn about this game through console and will potentially convert to Web3. So yeah, I think, again, looking into regulation, the user elections, looking into Telegram's growth, looking into the active experimentation of many really big players in Web3, I think we won't see anymore the typical view of a game being suddenly removed from the platform. But yeah, we will see how deep the level of technical integration will go.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, let's shift gears. Your report calls out, and I'm excited by this because it's rare that you get kind of new mechanics that seem to be adopted. Play to earn was the meta, as we call it in Web3, was the meta for the longest time, on the back of Axia Infinity, of course, in the early days. And that's basically the model that everybody copied for a long time. Some experimentation with other things, play to own was a thing for a while and what have you.
Play and earn. Yes.
Play and earn. Yeah, there was I had a whole episode a while back where I went through every acronym I could find or every version of it. And they were all kind of a take on the same thing. But now we've got this thing called play to airdrop. And it's been mentioned by multiple guests, Web3 guests that I've had over the last, 4 to 6 months, call it. Tell us more about what play to airdrop actually means and what are the kind of advantages and challenges of this approach? How is it, air quotes, better than play to earn or some of the other models that have come before?
Yes, of course. So, the concept of the airdrop is not, does not come from gaming. Yes, it's not new and it's not coming from gaming, but I think started from Pixels, and I don't want to be unfair to other projects, but definitely Pixels was the one that really, coined the term.
We had Luke on the show not that long ago, actually. He was a great episode, really interesting, and he's doing some really experimental stuff there.
So yeah, again, if we abstract all the details, eventually, instead of saying to people, yes, we're going to give you magic internet money, if you just play, you tie this to some meaningful play experience, some results. In this case, hopefully you minimize the inflationary pressure on your game economy, and this push to make a close to paranoid economic model work like play to earn. So, and I think play to airdrop really worked out because it tied very well with some developments in the DeFi space. We had some projects with a fantastic airdrop performance for the people that they played. So people make money or at least realize some profits at the time. And then they saw, oh my God, I can play my game, I can have fun, I can compete, I can do all the things that make me play games and potentially getting something back. So I think this is definitely a healthier iteration of play to earn, because you're not like, okay, we're going to drop our jobs and start playing Axie. It will be more about, I'm going to play, I'm going to compete, and guess what? If I'm good or if I spend so many hours, I might get something out of it. Obviously, the key limitation is, which is a strategic limitation for the Web3 space, is the distinction between a human being, a wallet, an AI agent, whatever it is. So try to mix the different trends. So we still have the pressure of bots being part of the game and how they can potentially alter the economic results and also the numbers that are being reported. And I don't think we have found a good solution to that. But to be fair, this is not the role of the economic model. The economic model will always have limitations. I think try to navigate the difference between a human being, an AI agent, a bot, or a farm of bots. It's something we will have to solve or accept for certain people. We don't even have to solve this as a problem. But yeah, it's something we'll have to navigate separately. But yeah, I think the airdrop was definitely a positive addition last year. After all, it incentivized people to actually play games for many hours. This gave some good data. So yeah, despite the limitations, I think it was definitely a positive thing. And, it's also a bigger ecosystem behind this that comes up. So, play to airdrop communities and games create the need for robust questing platforms that they go beyond the strict, I'm calling the API of a game. You need to merge Web3 achievements, Web2 achievements, your history, whatever. So it definitely opened up many opportunities for engagement platforms to play a role and try to complement this experience.
Do you think it's a big enough thing? I use thing here, it's a very broad word, encompasses a lot. But do you think play to airdrop has a potential to be one of the drivers of more mainstream Web3 adoption? Or is this more of a, okay, these games are now more sustainable and not massively inflationary. And so they can work on their own 2 feet, but it's not necessarily a driver of mass Web3 adoption. And by the way, are Web3 developers still trying to drive Web3 adoption, crypto adoption through gaming? That was one of the big things in the early days, which is like, well, gaming is going to bring us the next billion, consumers into crypto. Is that actually a belief that's widely held still?
Yeah, you made a very good point, and I will address this, let's say personally, not even as Game7. I don't think so. I think play to airdrop is a great way to optimize for engagement. Some people call it a bear market growth strategy. Like, okay, if you have to work with the existing user base, how do you engage them? How do you make them part of your economy? Sure. But, in a world where you have access to funding, great games building, a friendly regulatory environment, you want off the grids, right? You want the 100 more of the grids, try to bring users that don't really have to care about everything. They just want to have fun and potentially be a part of the economy in a number of ways. So with that being said, I do think Play Europe will continue to be a key part of the growth strategy for all Web3 games. Whether it's going to be the main thing or one of the 10 things that they're doing to grow their game, it's up to them. And obviously, yes, as game developers become more confident on the quality of the experience and the content they produce, I don't think they will rely too much into having this economical narrative to drive attention in the same way that, those people never played off the grid because they saw some financial incentive by killing or by winning tournaments. Now we've seen they're going to do this, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also have a play to airdrop campaign to the rest of the world through off the grid. But yeah, as game developers are more confident and as we see better experiences closer to the, large indie AA, AAA quality categories as we try to estimate this, I think we will rely less on play to airdrop, and we will find new ways, potentially by changing a few things and keeping the core of play to airdrop.
Yeah. You mentioned bots a couple of times, and of course, bots are always a problem in gaming. They're an even bigger problem in gaming if there's economic value transfer. And the reason I'm asking this question right on the heels of that previous one, which is, if play to airdrop is not necessarily going to be a big driver of Web3 adoption, which I agree with you, by the way. I don't think it on its own, it's going to drive lots of consumers like, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to come and play this game now. But there is still nevertheless... So there isn't the upside of driving lots of users. There's the upside of driving engagement, but then there's also the downside that there is economic value in play to airdrop if you can go and trade these things, right? And so whenever there's economic value, you're going to have bots. Whenever you have a popular game, you have bots regardless. If you have a economic value situation, even a smaller game is going to have bots coming in to try and exploit that, right? And of course, the bigger they get, the more bots you're going to have. So this is a huge problem, and I think everybody in the space knows that it is a huge problem. What are you seeing happen in the space? How are we measuring bot influence in games? How are we measuring real engagement in consumers and users and players versus what is inflating these numbers through bots? How do players even know that they're playing against real players or AI agents or bots? I think that's going to be a bigger problem with AI in particular going forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I probably have 10% of your experience building games, but I would respectfully disagree that bots are a problem for game developers. Bots can be misleading if we rely on the same metrics to raise money, to do marketing, then it becomes literally a lie, right? So I think given the rise of AI agents, of LLMs, I can't see a world where we can get rid of bots, if I'm being honest. So in this sense, maybe we just have to accept it and try to meaningfully make them part of the gameplay experience and find new ways or improve the ways we capture activity and engagement. Because again, this is borderline unacceptable. It's one thing to say, have an economy where you can play with a bot or with a human player. This might be acceptable for many game genres, but if you are reporting human users based on bot numbers, this is not good. So again, I think we're going to see a trend of games, of course, capitalizing on the attention to AI to say, okay, let's try to use AI agents as much as possible. You've seen so many Twitter accounts being run by agents that they can also learn and try to adjust how they react to the world based on some parameters. So yeah, for me, it's, I wouldn't say a lost battle, but I don't think we should really try to get rid of bots, but maybe try to meaningfully integrate bots in specific parts of the gameplay experience and on the side try to find new ways to capture engagement. This whole active wallet, total volume, like these metrics, they can mean everything or nothing sometimes.
Yeah, it's fair for you to push back. I'm going to push back on your pushback, and that is that bots.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. Exactly. Bots in traditional, air quotes, traditional gaming here, in any game, if they are perceived as giving others, like human players, an edge, this is why, like Fortnite, they boot cheaters immediately. As soon as they realize they're using an AI agent or a bot or whatever, they have all kinds of tools to detect this kind of stuff. It's not so much for the economic extraction of value, which does, is an extra layer in Web3. It's more around this game sucks because the bots are cheating and winning, and like, I'm not going to play this game because, I'm not having any fun. And that, as soon as your best players, especially games that rely on streamers and personalities and creators, UGC, things like that, as soon as you start to see that drop, it's a snowball effect, right? And the whole thing compounds on itself. And so that's the question I'm asking more about here. Yes, there's the economic piece as well. I don't know if leaning into bots is going to give you an ecosystem or any game, whether Web 2 or Web 3, that is actually going to be able to grow to mass market scale, right? And I know we're not specifically talking about that for Web 3. We're not talking like, here is the Web 3 environment, and by the way, we're going mass market next year. It's more around games they have the hardest time growing regardless. If you are perceived as being a cheating game where bots are like rife and running around, and you as a player can't really compete meaningfully, you're not going to want to play that game. There's lots of other games to play. So that's the point I'm trying to make here, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's particularly rife in Web3 because there is that extra layer of economic value. There's even more incentive to try and game the system.
100% right. Look, I don't want to change anything of what you said. In my scenario, let me say this. In my scenario, you enable bots through allowing theoretically any gamer to build their own customized bots, right? That's the whole point. It's not so much, yes, if I'm competing against a bot that I cannot create or have access to myself, that's cheating. I don't want to play this game. There's no point. But I'm talking about scenarios where, we can have this concept of clever NPCs that work for us in the game or doing things, and potentially these NPCs can become better based on myself being a good trainer or not a good developer. Because again, in this case, you're giving an edge to technical people, not to the average gamer. But I think through, again, the rise of AI tools that could allow people, non-technical people, to do more, we can envision a future where we have a mix of human players and their own bots or their optimized AI agents. I know what I'm saying is probably too stretched, and a couple of years from now, but yeah, this was the future. I could potentially see a role for bots inside games, right?
Interesting.
I know many teams, especially small, super innovative teams, they try to do some experiments on that. And yeah, I'm very pleased to see this in the market. But yeah, we will see. It's obviously super early to talk about any impact.
Interesting. Okay. All right. No, so I buy that argument. So I think we both kind of agree with each other and slightly disagree with each other. But that's fine. That's the way it should be. We don't know what's going to happen. So we will see, as with so many things in Web3. Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about funding landscape and tokens. So kind of the financial aspect, the funding aspect of how this entire ecosystem, everything requires capital, right? In some way, shape, or form. So let's start first with funding landscape in general, kind of traditional VC funding.
Yes.
I think the report states that it grew in Web3 by about 17% in 2024 compared to 2023. But of course, those numbers were tiny. It's like a low base compared to what it was in the go-go days of 2020, 2021, and first half of 22, I think. So investors are coming back. But I think you note also that it's a shift towards smaller rounds, not so many of these mega rounds where they're putting like, here's $100 million for, pre proof of concept kind of team. What's going on? What are you seeing?
Yes. So while, as you said, numbers are up, I think the bigger picture is that we're looking into a new reality for funding. Investors are there. Investors are willing to support. I would argue that investors I try to find the new axis or the new thing to make them super excited, right? I think this is a common pattern when talking to investors. They say, yes, we're still deploying, we're happy to deploy, but let's do something different, right? In 2021 and 2022, with, of course, like multiples of the annual funding we've had today, there was a big part of ambiguity in a creative way. People did not actually know how all this infrastructure and content will deploy. They were investing in gaming. Now we have tried a few things. We know that certain things, they might still work, but they cannot produce supernormal returns. So I think some investors expect from the market to be more ambitious and more innovative. And this also comes and ties very well with the lack of playable games. Again, if you don't have playable games, you cannot actively experiment. You can't do all these crazy things. That one of them will be the new Axie moment, as we had this aha moment like 3 years back. But yeah, I think, again, investors are optimistic. Investors are here to support, but they're looking for new models, new approaches, new perspectives. The rounds are smaller, indeed. I think the market correction that started November, December this year for a brief period definitely brought some excitement back to a few projects that said, okay, you know what? There is the potential for us to still grow. So rounds become smaller. There is a clear path to DGE for many teams in the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months. So there is no need for these mega rounds for 5-year-long developments. The plan is take some money, work on your meta, work on something that you can differentiate, try to launch your token and find your place in the market, which is a slightly different proposition than investing in 2021, where it was like, yeah, we need to really support you to do all the cool things in the market. Now, the TGE is a big part of the growth strategy.
Are we still seeing funds that are exclusively going after Web3 being raised? That was the big trend not that long ago. Back in the heyday, obviously, you'd see, Andreessen would raise their giant gaming fund, and then they'd have a separate crypto gaming fund. Play Ventures, which was a backer of ours, back in the day, they had their kind of mainstream fund, and then they raised their future fund, which was focused on Web3. Are we still seeing that? Or are funds still investing out of their original funds? Is that still happening, or are they done? The powder is gone. Are they raising new funds? Curious to hear what that dynamic looks like as well on the investor side of things, not the investment side of things.
Sure. Even though we don't report always the difference between a venture round and a fundraising money, I think while we've seen some renewed interest over the past few months, especially again as we're looking for as we're all optimistic about 2025, this is also reflected into the fundraising of investors. I do also think that there is a pattern in the market of merging sometimes Web3 with AI, which might make sense and not make sense to a few other people. But you're seeing as these two options are the potential.
Well, it helps you in your pitch deck.
Yes, it helps.
Hey,
but
how about if we combine Web3 plus AI? That's the difference. That's what's going to make it work.
So yeah, we've seen sometimes investors trying to saying that we're investing to whatever is innovative. Sometimes it's AI, sometimes it's Web3, sometimes it's something in the middle. And yeah, with AI being definitely a priority, let's say, for investors, this is to be expected. But yeah, I don't think we've seen this need for Web3 specific funds today, because again, I think as an industry, we're looking for the next theme. Is it the off the grid or the off the grids of the future? Sure. Is it AI agents and autonomous games that do whatever, players that they can do whatever they want? Maybe. Is it some kind of an infra play optimized for gaming? We will see. So unless we know exactly what the key theme will be for the next 18 months, I don't see the need to necessarily investors try to specialize their efforts into a very specific vertical.
Got it. That makes total sense. Okay. But yeah, back in the go-go days of the heady crypto bull run, you could raise a token launch or do a token launch and raise an ungodly amount of money. You note in your report that gaming token launches increased by about 200% year over year. So that's a big increase.
Correct.
But how are they comparing? How much are they raising compared to back in the day?
So yeah, I think token launch as a term describes a different thing than what it did in the ICO era or other phases of Web3. So yes, we've seen more projects actually going live with tokens, but it's really a new model. Now you're talking about a way more. Okay, let's get this. Give me one more shot on this. So yeah, now we have a different approach for projects trying to launch their token. You start by play trade you build a community, then you potentially getting the exchange listing, then you try to add utility and add the demand. So very different from the more aggressive, let's say, ICO era for tokens. I still think that the number of tokens launching is relatively speaking low. Yes, it's doubled up since last year as expected, because the year before was a very quiet year, and still the ecosystem trying to heal from the Luna, the FTX, the regulatory uncertainty. So we're definitely going to see more launches next year. Now, the big question mark is what centralized exchanges will do, because this has been a key bottleneck for many projects. So we have two paths. Either we're going to see, as more people joining crypto, and as prices go up and as demand goes up, potentially exchanges will allow again a big part of those projects to launch. Or we're going to try to see, as we've seen already, alternatives into launching a token that does not necessarily go through the big guys giving their blessing. Many people are saying, okay, this is definitely a big opportunity. It's also ridiculously challenging, technically, financially, legally. So many challenges there. But yeah, I've heard many game developers saying it would be great if we can find new ways to launch our tokens in the market that is more, aligned with the structure of a gaming token, not necessarily a DeFi or something else. We will see. I think without this change in the optimism in the market for 2025, I would say I would give higher chances of alternative models growing. Now, I also think there is a good chance that exchange listing will normalize, and all the teams that they want to launch and they're just waiting for the right time will have the chance to do so.
Gotcha. Okay. A natural follow-on question is, obviously, we're going to have, presumably, who knows, a different regulatory environment under a Trump presidency than we would have seen under a Harris presidency. Biden went after crypto pretty hard. Gary Gensler is no hero, shall we say, to the crypto community. If this changes, if there truly is okay, you know what? Do what you want. It's a free for all. Like, we're going to do the lightest of touches, if any regulation on this space. Do you see that changing the token launch dynamics?
I think that's ambition, yes. That's the expectation in the market. And let's be clear, the biggest problem of regulatory uncertainty is how to launch a token, right? Should I do this in this way? Should I incorporate otherwise? Should I try to follow any kind of practice that I don't really have to, but I don't really need to, but I have to navigate this complexity? So yes, I definitely see token launches as the first problem to try to tackle. And I think the key word, as we try to say, is not necessarily a positive environment, but is a predictable, a stable environment, right? No one requests for necessarily good terms, but they expect clear rules on how to play the game. This is the biggest request from crypto projects, and we can also specify this for gaming. But yeah, again, I think there is ambition, there is hope in the market, and I don't think we have any reason not to be optimistic at this point of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Shifting gears again, then, from the financials to more the ecosystem stuff. This first question is really around who are the teams that are building. Your report notes that over 90% of games in 2024 came from indie teams. I don't know how you define indie, but
yes,
smaller teams. That presumably means they're not doing AAA. We already touched on that briefly earlier on the Telegram segment. What does this reveal to you about the ecosystem? Is it mature? Is it growing? Is it scary place for larger teams, and investors with larger checks? All of these things seem to go hand in hand. Smaller checks, no new Web3 focused funds, lots of indies. All the games are essentially smaller. It's an interesting dynamic.
It is. And it can be both, right? For me, it's a sign of maturity, and it's a sign that maybe AAA at this point is not the best fit, but let me explain why. So first of all, we do understand that, classifying per production quality as we name it, because AAA or AA does not necessarily describe the quality of an experience. You can have fun with the simplest game in the world, or you might find the most polished experience very boring. So we're talking about production quality. We're talking about the resources available to each team to really do their thing. And So yeah, for another year, based on our methodology, and in contrast to sometimes the marketing material of the space,
Right.
we identified that indie comprises by far the biggest bucket into the teams entering the space. This number refers to the percentage of new games per their production quality. Again, I think this is a sign of maturity. The mainstream market is primarily comprised of indie developers. Indie is not a bad thing. It's not. We sometimes have a taboo saying indie is like, okay, why not AAA? Because AAA has specific problems and we have our own problems as Web3. So maybe let's try to work through one problem at a time. So yes, for me, getting back to your point, it's a sign of maturity. It's perfectly fine. I think indies have shorter development cycles, the mentality, the risk appetite to really try to do all these quote unquote stupid in the beginning, marvelous after experiments that could give this breakthrough to the space. And we can also see this with the big publishers being present in Web3, right? With Ubisoft, with Nexon, with Konami, with Bandai Namco, with Square Enix. Even these projects, even these teams, they won't say, okay, here's my AAA best title in the flagship title right now in the market. Let's put Web3 in it. They start with smaller projects. I think it's important to understand that as a game developer of a AAA game, you need so much money, more than you would expect. You have so many difficulties, and you have to also cope with the challenges of mainstream game development around themes, around trends. So that's one complexity. Now, imagine this alongside the decisions such as, should I have my own chain or not? Should I use ZK or Optimistic? Should I use Solana or EVM? Should I have 1 token, 3 tokens, or 5 tokens? Should I do play to earn or play to earn? So my point is, every few months in crypto, we are getting obsessed with different things, and it's very hard to optimize for this, for this ecosystem as you try to build something that is really a AAA game. And guess what? When you are ready to deploy a AAA game, the technical landscape might be significantly different. So unless there is consensus on what is the high-level structure of the gaming stack, it's unrealistic to expect that AAA games will start now, we will build for 5 years, we'll spend $200 million, and we'll still be able to keep up with Web3 innovation. There are exceptions, of course. And, sometimes when I say this, people say, what about Off the Grid? What about other projects? There are AAA worthy teams that have been already building for a couple of years. But I do think the teams that they're gonna really make the breakthrough are the teams that are, while big enough and have enough funding and previous AAA experience. For me, that's a must. They also have been in the Web3 space for quite some time. It's very hard to start competing from day one. And it's also very hard to try to outsource the Web3 innovation department to a different party. It needs to be part of the DNA of the team, of the leadership team. It's very hard to just say, oh, I'm using this partner and they will make sure they're going to add Web3 in our game. I don't think it's working like that, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's talk more about technology then. I think the big trend I think this was true even last year, is that developers are really switching more towards a layer 2, even a layer 3 strategy as opposed to an L1. Immutable has been on the show multiple times, including founder and CEO Robbie Ferguson, and we've had multiple guests in conjunction with game launches and big moments. It seems like Immutable is the big player that's making the big push truly in gaming, and have been from the very beginning. So they've been very focused on this, and they've had a lot of technical innovation around wallet management and seamless onboarding flows and what have yous. And your report calls out that I think most of the game launches involving an L2 last year were on Immutable. Talk us a little bit about the big winners, the big losers over the last year in this L2, L3 space, and why the move away from L1s. I know the answer to this because it's technically very challenging. Why do all that hard work? But tell us any other reasons that might be playing into this trend.
Yes, I think there are a couple of dynamics, some of them more technical nature, some of them of commercial nature or fundraising nature. So yeah, big picture for the biggest gaming ecosystems, Immutable grew a lot, effectively to number 2 spot behind only Polygon, the existing Polygon POS network. Immutable represents the idea that you're building a performant gaming optimized layer 2 for all the games in the world. We've seen the likes of Avalanche and Arbitrum. Arbitrum grew also a lot over the past years with a different proposition. Like, you go to either other gaming ecosystems and you say launch your own chain or like specific titles. Do you want your own network? So we're talking about two different value propositions from this ecosystem, similar to Avalanche. Avalanche have their own layer one network, but they also have a custom environment for Shrapnel, for Off the Grid, for all these games they have on their portfolio. We also saw Ronin grew a lot. Of course, Ronin follows a different approach, right? Ronin double up their games, but no one will say wow because the number is still low because Ronin has a very selective approach, right? People should not just do a one-to-one comparison. There's no point, right? I can launch 100 games and call it a leading ecosystem. That's not the point. So Ronin has a very selective, very curated approach, trying to grow their portfolio in a different way than the likes of, again, Arbitrum Immutable or Avalanche. Now, when it comes to technical themes, you said, why not layer one? And I think we're past this obsession of layers. In the beginning, yes, it was layer one. At some point, we realized a single chain will most likely not be able to provide space for all of us. And the concept of layer two is that we're still part of the wider metropolitan Ethereum ecosystem, but you have your own space. You can potentially have your own token as a gas token. You can do a number of customizations that could potentially help your economy and your valuation if you're going to raise money, by the way. So that's why I said it's not always the technical need. Yes, I remember in 2021 or 2 when Ronin said, you know what, Axie cannot survive anymore on Ethereum. We're going to launch our own layer one. But again, my point is, today, I don't think we should see things in the concept of layer one to layer two or layer three, because also we have a very mature ecosystem of abstraction solutions to messaging. So put simply, the question is, do you need the main chain where everything is on there? Do you need a gaming ecosystem, a gaming city to live on? Or do you want to build your own city? You want your own chain. So far, we've seen that layer twos, layer threes from popular frameworks like, the Arbitrum Orbit or the OpenStack of Optimism have been a popular choice for teams that they want to either launch their own gaming ecosystem or their own or an app chain for their own titles. But we will see. I think until we have good metrics from usage, it's a bit too early to call winners. But last year, we've seen it became very easy to deploy custom environments through, again, the rise of these frameworks and these roll-up as a service providers, even for Avalanche, right? It's very easy to deploy these networks. So I think it's early to call winners, but we definitely saw a clear preference toward Arbitrum, Avalanche, and OpenStack for people that they want to build new ecosystems like Immutable for their own games.
Nice. Okay. So that was a trend I think we had last year. So that trend is really continuing.
And also for layer threes, we're seeing a very strong growth. Like layer threes weren't even an option 1 year and a half, and now,
That's true. Okay. I have a final question. We've mentioned, actually I have a couple of final questions, but this is a very specific final question. You've mentioned off the grid a couple of times, and we shouldn't assume that our audience actually knows that. I probably should have brought this up earlier. Tell us more about what is off the grid. Why are Web3 enthusiasts excited about this game, and what do you think it means for the future of Web3? Like, this is a path that Web3 developers could go that is showing some traction with this one title called Off the Grid. Tell us more about this.
Yeah. So in simple terms, Off the Grid is a very fun shooter game, right? That people can have fun by playing. It is using blockchain technology. It will be using an Avalanche network that at some point will be part of the process without the users knowing it. And it has been a game that while Web3, they had a very successful launch campaign of collaborating with key streamers that you would see in the Fortnites of this world, not on Web3 games. So, and this led that to a significant game base that they saw this game and they were very excited about it. I think so the question is why Web3 really loves Off the Grid, and I do think we need to embrace and support any Off the Grid of this world. Like, Off the Grid is not about Avalanche, it's not about specific technology. Off the Grid represents that content is enough to really onboard people to Web3 games, and you don't really have to either promise something that doesn't make sense and is unsustainable, or talk about the technical jargon all the time. So again, for me, the rise of Off the Grid, and for many other people, represents a healthier option to user acquisition. Obviously, for those that are close to the team, it's not Off the Grid. It's not the Gunzilla team is not a random team out there. They have significant experience, significant funding, many years of development, and these are things that you cannot really, you can't really get out of the way. You need to do this the proper way. But yeah, I think Off the Grid brought back some optimism in the space for people that believe that there's no way a Web3 game would be fun enough to really compete with other games on the charts of, Epic Games or maybe Sony or Xbox charts. And yeah, we need to bring this confidence back to the Web3 development teams. We can make good games, yes, given good time, given sufficient time, given good funding. I think we need to be optimistic that gameplay on its own is enough to be a demand driver for Web3 games.
Yeah, absolutely. People have been saying that for the longest time. So, well, the game has to stand on its own 2 feet. It has to be a fun game. Games are designed to be fun. Games are entertainment. You have lots of games to choose from. Just because it has Web3 doesn't mean you're going to go play it. So that has been true since the very beginning. And so continues to be true, I guess, is what we're saying here. Okay. My final question, really, before we get to the fun final one, which is, what do you see the trends being next over the next 12 months? I know this is a fool's errand because this is Web3 and this, in space moves really fast. And because the regulation is still unclear, that, more so than in traditional, air quotes, traditional gaming, that has an impact. And there's certain things you can and can't do depending on what the regulatory environment looks like. So what do you think the big trend is going to be over the next year? Are we going to look back and there was no way we could have looked forward last year and said, hey, Telegram is going to be a huge story.
Absolutely.
So what do you think we're going to be talking about next year? By the way, I hope you come back next year and we talk about this all over again.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think this is a very important disclaimer you made. You need to start by saying there's close to, not zero, but less than 10% chance you will be able to actively predict what's going to happen. We can talk about the progress of what has happened already and the influence of those, but it's very hard to really try to understand the trends that are coming, or they will be shaped throughout the year. I think you need to start by that to, if we just try to really predict the future, we need to understand the limitations of this process. Looking into next year, I do think themes that they will definitely say what we know. I think Telegram will continue to be this because we know many teams have committed or they have announced their plans to do more things on Telegram. I don't know exactly what this Telegram content strategy will include, but it will be a big surprise for me if we don't see more companion apps, more side engagements, more full titles, especially titles that are like, typical mobile genres, if we don't see these implemented on a Telegram environment. I think we will have to see some experimentation, and I do think we will see more experimentation when it comes to the tokenomic side of things, with the assumption we're talking about a more relaxed regulatory environment. The next hypothesis I would make would be that, we're going to see teams try to do more, try to do different things, try to rethink how they can structure their token economies, because it's the tokens and, the business models we have right now, while they have made some progress, we still don't have the answer to the question how you can make money as a Web3 game publisher, as a Web3 game studio. So these simple fundamental questions, they still remain unanswered. Last thing I would say, and I will not talk about infrastructure because I think we talked a lot about infrastructure over the past years, and I don't think it will really make a difference. Infra is something, it needs to exist, but it will not necessarily make you win in the market. Mm-hmm. Definitely an area that people are excited, and we've seen some very interesting experimentation, are AI agents. For AI agents, again, let's demystify it for a minute because it can mean so many things. As you know, we've seen this environment through LLMs. We all use ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, whatever, whatever your flavor is. My point is, what happens if you take the logic that allowed these tools to exist and you add some sense of autonomy and the tools for third parties like gamers to customize them? We've seen trends with, Twitter accounts now trying to do cool social things autonomously. We might see this in the future inside games. And there are many shapes of this autonomy could look like inside the gaming environment. But yeah, I do think this definitely would drive a big part of both investment and experimentation. Maybe look at the fourth one. I do expect more teams trying to really go after the off-the-grid playbook and, get ready for a very good gameplay experience. Don't talk too much about Web3. Go live. Try to try to become popular, and then make use of this user base to slightly try to convert them to Web3. I think we're lucky that Off the Grid really turned out well, and we had this great reaction by streamers and the gaming community, because it opens up another option in the growth playbook for Web3 games. But yeah, that's why my best take. The honest answer is we don't know, and we can discuss this. Not we will see. We don't know. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll come back next year. I'll play back your predictions. I should have done that last year. I should have recorded your predictions and played them back this year. But okay, great. And then I have but one final question for all of our guests. We are a gaming podcast after all. What 3 games are you playing at the moment, or are you most excited by, whether Web 2, Web 3, mobile, console, whatever?
Okay. I'm soccer or football big gamer for the past 30 years of my life. So I will start with FIFA or EA Sports. Yeah, it's a bit boring, but I had to say this. Off the Grid, yes, it's important. We try to keep coming back to those Web3 games. And by the way, it's something we need to all do more. We're talking about Web3 games. Let's also try to play them.
Yeah.
And of course, lastly, coming back to a fantastic project we have on the Game7 ecosystem, a very interesting project, Market Wars, which is a modded version of a remake of World of Warcraft. It's an experiment. It's a radical experiment, and it's definitely something to keep an eye for the next year. But yeah, big picture, let's try to play more Web3 games and not just only talk about them, because it's very hard to really be in touch with their pains and everything if you don't ever play those games, right?
Totally. All right. Well, that's a great place to end. George, thank you so much for coming on the pod again. I look forward to seeing you again in a year or sooner if you have exciting news to share along the way. Where can our listeners and our viewers go and check out this report from Game7?
Yeah, we will have the link. It's on our website, on the research tab, and it's the State of Web3 Gaming 2024. Otherwise, they can see across all our socials. There will be plenty of opportunities to download the report.
Perfect. And we'll obviously put a link in the show notes as well. So with that, another great episode. Thank you so much, George, again. And of course, a big thank you as always to all of our listeners. We'll be back next week with more interviews, more insights, and more analysis from the weird and wonderful world of gaming. So until next time, friends, feel free to send questions, guest recommendations, and comments to me. My email is nico@naavik.co.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like,
Years from
subscribe,
now,
comment,
what does
or give a
LinkedIn
5-star
gaming look
review.
like to you?
And if you
So,
want to reach out or provide feedback,
number one,
shoot us a note
like
at
when
podcast@naavik.co,
when I think about
or
like
find us on
ultimate
Twitter
success,
and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn
and when
more
I think
about what
like,
Naavik
what
has to
even, like,
offer,
her vision
make sure to check
statement
out our
is,
website,
like,
www.naavik.co.
thinking-oriented games
There,
become
you
the
can sign up
world's
for the
most
number one
common
games industry
professional
newsletter,
conversation
Naavik
starter,
Digest, or contact us
we
to
don't.
learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services.
That's how
Again,
we
that
that's
is
how we measure success, right? It's not like a certain number of players.
Thanks
It's not
for
a certain
listening,
retention
and we'll catch
number.
you
It's
in the
not a
next
revenue
episode.
number. If